I think one thing about dark academia is that it likes to talk so much about privilege when it comes to class and wealth, but it does not want to talk about privilege when it comes to race. And I hate everything, but I love this book. I am obsessed. And it's fine. Hello friends, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel. This story ain't over. So I have been meaning to do a dark academia vlog for the longest time, and at last I am about to embark on one of the most epic journeys ever as I read some of the most popular dark academia books ever. Many people have done a video like this, so I'm not in any way original, but I am excited to take a look at these books, see what I think of them, and see how they compare to each other in a general sense of dark academia and what parts of dark academia they hit. So before I get into the vlog and me reading each of these books, I did want to talk a little bit about what is dark academia. Recently I watched the lovely Leonie's video on dark academia. If you don't know, Leonie is from the channel The Book Leo. She did a very comprehensive video on dark academia, recommending a bunch of dark academias, but also telling you sort of what defines dark academia. And it's a fantastic video. You should definitely go check it out. I'll leave it linked down below. But one of the things that I loved that she did in that video was listing out what dark academia is and the various components that make it up, and sort of classifying different dark academias in different sections. So I'm just gonna quickly go over what she said in that video. She said that a dark academia has to have these 5 or 6 things. The first is that an outsider must join a new setting. The second is that that setting should definitely be an academic setting. The third is that it should involve some sort of obsession amongst the characters, and often a very dark obsession that consumes their lives, and that can be either an academic obsession or an obsession with the next element, which is death. So this death is of the crime fiction variety. It's not really about who did the crime, but really why did they do it, and oftentimes the main characters are involved in the murder in some way, or they're trying to solve it. And I think it's a really interesting element to the dark academia story and what really makes it very dark. And oftentimes that death ends up being a critique of the whole entire system that is going on in this dark academia. So this is our 5th element, critique. We're either critiquing the academia, the elitism, the obsession, the excessive ambition, or in the case of some of the books that I'm going to be reading in this vlog, sort of the hoarding of knowledge and the knowledge that is kept amongst only the powerful and privileged. The final element is something that is not required for dark academia, but it is often found in some other dark academia books or dark academia adjacent books, and that is the supernatural or occult. So in a couple of the books I'm going to be reading in this vlog, there is a supernatural occult element, which I think is super fun. And as someone who loves fantasy, I think this is a really fun element, but I don't think it's by any means necessary for a dark academia. So with that lengthy intro out of the way, the first book that I'll be reading for this video is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a highly anticipated release for me, and one that is highly talked about on BookTube, BookTok, and Bookstagram at the moment. Next, I'll be rereading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This one's definitely more on the supernatural occult side of dark academia, but also one that is talked about a lot. And when I read this a couple years ago when it first came out, I did not think of it as a dark academia per se. It didn't really form in my brain that way because of the supernatural occult element to it. But I'm going to be looking at it with a different lens this time, and I've had some recent discussions with some friends about how this works as a dark academia, and I'm interested to think about that and discuss. After that, I'll be semi-rereading The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I have read the self-published version of this book, and this is the traditionally published version. I've heard that it's not much different, but I do want to delve back into the story because the second book in the series is coming out very soon. So I think it's a good time to tackle this one again. After that, I'll be rereading If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This one involves a lot of Shakespeare, which I'm excited for, and a murder. The 5th book on this list is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This will be another reread for me, but the sequel is coming out soon, so I do want to pick this one up again, and I have a lot of thoughts about this one, and I'm excited to think about it in terms of dark academia, because when I first picked it up, I definitely didn't think about it that way. And then finally, for this video, I will also be reading the OG of all dark academias, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I am very apprehensive about picking this one up, but I'm excited to see how it goes, and I'm excited to read it last because I want to sort of read the other books and sort of put them in my brain and then examine this and see how all of those books may have come out of this or draw themes from this, or have similarities to this, but also think about how this is just the starting point of dark academia and how other authors have taken dark academia in so many other levels and depths, and just see how this started things out. I am very scared to read this one because I just know it's going to be super elitist in many ways, and that is what I've heard, but I'm excited to see how it goes and check it out. I feel like it could be a hit or miss. I may love it, I may hate it, I may think it is well crafted, but I might not enjoy the characters or sort of some of the themes, but we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to try this one out. So out of the books on this list, the ones that I have not read are Babel and The Secret History. The other 4 I have read. And on this list, The Secret History, Ninth House, and If We Were Villains are all by non-POC authors. And then Babel, The Atlas Six, and Legendborn are all by POC authors. I'm so excited to see what this vlog yields, so let's get into it. It's gonna be the longest journey of your life, but we're gonna learn some things. So let's get into it. I'm really excited to talk to you about Babel or Babel. I never know what to call this because I've talked to other people who have been like, no, it's Babel, and then other people who have been like, no, it's Babel, but regardless, I've been calling it Babel, I think. I am about halfway through. I am just really loving commentary that this book is having and the journey of the main character as well, Robin. He's definitely going through like a loss of innocence, I would say, and he's also coming to terms with like the evils of colonization and how, you know, he can be sort of aiding and abetting the empire while also wanting so much not to see it succeed, and it's just really, really fascinating. I have heard that the second half of the book delves more into the dark academia aspect, which I'm really excited for. One thing I've been loving as I've been reading this book is like a lot of the very quotable lines, and one that really blew me away was one that was actually used in a lot of like the promotional material for this marketing campaign for the book, which was that a translation is always an act of betrayal. I think that's the line, and it was such a fascinating line to me because it delves into some of the concepts in the book as well, and some of the magic system as well, and how translation can really distort a meaning and betray an original meaning, which I think is just such an interesting word to use when talking about this, because we're talking about it in the context of colonialism and how, you know, translation is used as a weapon against colonized countries and places, and it's just so fascinating. I don't have coherent thoughts about this. I just like love that this metaphor is being used, this metaphor of betrayal, I guess. R.F. Kuang is just making so much brilliant commentary on this subject that I just love everything about this. With all that said, I'm gonna go off and make some tea and just cozy up. I'm gonna use my little pumpkin mug that my friend got me for my birthday recently, and yeah, I'm just gonna curl up and feel all the vibes of the season as I read. I have a few hours before dinner when my sister comes over, so I'm gonna try to make a use of that time and really get some reading done, and then hopefully read after my sister leaves and finish up the book before the night is over, because I just really want to get through this book. I feel like I've been dragging my feet and reading this for weeks now, so I just really need to get it done so I can move on to the other books for this vlog. Okay, I'm loving this book so much. There's so many layers to it. I am at a part in the book where they're just sort of talking about the Chinese and British relationship going on here, and it's just so interesting. And opium is like a really large topic in the Poppy War series, and so it's interesting to see it like in this book as well and how it's like reflected in this book. I just find it so fascinating. The Poppy War was sort of like a fictionalized version of our real world and also set in China / like the adjacent China in the book. Whereas this is like taking it from the Western perspective coming into things, and it's so interesting to see that perspective and like Robin as this character out of his depth. You know, he is Chinese, but he's also part British, and it's just so interesting like the way that this book sort of deals with the conundrums within his identity. I have a feeling that like some bad things are on the horizon for this book, as R.F. Kuang's books tend to be, because I feel like they usually are happy and going well at the beginning, but then they have some really dark bits towards the ends. So I'm excited to see where this is gonna go.
The British are turning my homeland into a narco-military state to pump drugs into yours. That's how this empire connects us. Robin saw a great spider's web in his mind there. Cotton from India to Britain, opium from India to China, silver becoming tea and porcelain in China, and everything flowing back to Britain. It sounded so abstract.
I was getting sleepy while reading, which is a common problem for me recently, so I decided to grab the audiobook from Kobo. The narrator for this one is actually really nice because they have this wonderful British accent, so I didn't know that going into this book, or else I would have grabbed the audiobook sooner. And they also know how to pronounce many of the Chinese words that show up in the book, so I'm liking that as well. So I'm on chapter 17 of book 3. And I'm close to book 4 right now, which is exciting. And there's 2 more books, so book 4 and 5. And I have about 200 pages left. This book is so long. I wish it was shorter, but here we are. So yeah, I'm hopefully gonna use this audiobook to get through the rest of the book before the end of the day. I'll probably update you guys once I get to the end of book 4, because at that point we'll be like in the thick of things, and hopefully I'll have more thoughts by then. Hello friends, I know I said I was gonna update you after I finished book 4, but I just finished book 3 and shit has hit the fan. Oh my god, something very, very major just happened in the book, and I'm so excited because I feel like it's gonna have some really interesting ramifications for the rest of the book, and also because I feel like the first 300 pages of this book, the main characters have been very sort of passive, I would say. There's a lot of things happening to them, but they're not necessarily taking much action on their own. But I feel like this event and thing that has happened at the end of book 3 is really gonna make them have to be more active participants in what's going on. I'm so intrigued. If you guys have read Babel and you know what I'm talking about, you know, because this was like a crazy moment. Like, this entire chapter captivated me immensely. And it was all just so sudden as well. It felt like it happened so quickly. And also just listening to this audiobook is amazing. Let me tell you, I really wish I had used it for the beginning half of the book, because it really would have helped, because I felt like it was just really slow for me at the beginning. I also really like that the audiobook has a second narrator, like a woman who reads out the footnotes as well, like right as they come in. So you don't have to always look down and find them. She just reads them out as soon as that moment comes, which is really nice. I'm so excited for the rest of this book. Oh my god, it's really hitting the vibes. I can see the dark academia aspects coming through, and sort of the more sinister, dark things coming. So yeah, I cannot wait. I'm so excited. This is gonna be so interesting. Yeah, because so far it's been very focused on the translation and academic setting and the colonialism aspect of the book, but right now it's getting into the darker aspects of things, which I'm really liking. So yeah, oh my god, I can't wait. Oh my god, okay, so I have so many thoughts about this book, so I had to do another clip, but I just read a few more chapters and I'm loving the commentary that is being made with Letty's character. She is the white character in their group of friends, and it's just so interesting and amazingly done how her character is built, because she's so realistic, and sort of the delusion that her privilege provides her that she just can't shake, even though her friends are telling her all of these things. And it's just so interesting. I'm trying not to spoil things too much, but I just find it fascinating the way that white people can continue to hold up their illusions and pretend that everything is okay. And even when things are explained to them, they just refuse to see the other perspective, I guess. And there's this moment at the end of the chapter where Remy, Robin, and Victoire are looking at each other and they're thinking, why is it that we've told Letty all of these things and she is the one who needs to be comforted, right? And it's this white guilt that is just so frustrating. Even when they realize their privilege, they're still giving off this white guilt that just makes it impossible to do anything productive and move forward. And it's just such an interesting discussion topic. Yeah, I have no coherent thoughts about this, but I just loved how it's being examined through Letty's character, and I'm so curious to see where her character is gonna go by the end of this book, because I feel like there's 2 ways it could go, and part of me wants it to go one way, but part of me is oh, there's a more hopeful way of this going, but part of me is no, it's definitely gonna go this one way. So we'll see. I feel like there's an interesting twist that could come with her character, but we'll see how it goes. Hello friends, it's a little bit later. I am close to the end of book 4 and I'm gonna lose it. Something has happened that is very upsetting. I'm not gonna cry, but I am upset and it's fine. My suspicions about a certain thing have come to fruition, but they've come to fruition in a way that is making me very angry, and I am upset. And that is all I wanted to say. I am on chapter 24. I have this much of the book left, this much, and I'm full of rage. And I hate everything, but I love this book. If you have read Babel and you know what I'm talking about, which is the end of chapter 23, then please express your rage and pain and let me know what you think. Hello friends, it is a new day. It is Tuesday around 10 a.m. I am taking a tiny little break from work to update you on my progress because I finished Babel this morning. And oh my god, do I have thoughts. This was so freaking good and I can't get over how much I love this. I had a prediction for the ending of this book based off of the Poppy War series and the tone of R.F. Kuang's previous writing, and I was mostly right, but I was still like really excited by this ending and I absolutely loved it and I thought it was fantastic and really well done. There were some extra little things that were thrown in there that I didn't expect, but I sort of had seen crumbs of throughout the book and that I was like excited to see confirmed by the end. But overall, this was fucking fantastic. I am just so blown by the level of research and intricacy that this book has and that R.F. Kuang put into it. I think she's a wonderful writer and did such an amazing job with this book, not only in terms of like the characters and the plot, but also all of the themes that she covers and the very hard look at colonialism in this book. This is the dark academia that I've always wanted and that the world deserves and that we as people of color deserve, because I think there's no way to think about dark academia without thinking of the POC experience and how that is so vastly different from the white academics experience. I just love this so much and it was so well done. Part of me just wants to go back and reread this from the beginning and just think about all of the different little details that she adds in, because I feel like there's just so much to this book. There's so many details and like historical references and references to like different languages and translations, and it's just so fascinating. Like I feel like I learned so much, but I also loved the unbounded nature of her imagination, like how far she takes everything. Obviously, this isn't completely historically accurate because it is a fantasy and she took liberties with certain details, but a lot of this is based off of history and most of it is based off of history, and it's just so intriguing to see this sort of version, this alternate history. It is definitely a 5 out of 5 stars for me. A very successful anticipated release. I'm so happy that I ended up loving this because I would have been so freaking disappointed if I didn't. And it just lived up in so many ways to what I was hoping for and expecting, but also delivered in so many different ways as well. Aside from that, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on Babel. I think there's so much to discuss when it comes to this book and the themes that it covers, and I just loved it so much. I personally don't love happy endings all that much. I don't love like endings that are wrapped up in a bow where everything is okay, because I think life is rarely like that, and I feel a lot more at peace with bittersweet endings than I am with fully wrapped up endings, because those just make me anxious. So this ending felt just so good to me and made so much sense, also given the trajectory of the characters' stories and sort of the mental journey that they go on as well, especially Robin. I think his ending also makes a lot of sense to me. I do think that if you haven't picked this up and you've been on the fence, I think you should definitely pick it up. If you love academia, if you're looking for a dark academia, if you want a book that examines colonialism, if you want a book with POC main characters, if you want to confront your thoughts about the world and the effects of colonialism, and also just if you are a white person trying to come to terms with your own privilege, I think this is a good one to read. You may have some interesting revelations about your life and your place in the world and the history that we all come from. I think everyone comes from a different place of ignorance and knowledge, so I think there's just so many facets to it, and I think you should check it out. If you love sweet muffiny characters and some slightly queer overtures to this book, I would highly recommend picking it up. So I started reading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo on audiobook while I was doing my makeup today, and I'm already loving the vibes. I honestly don't remember a lot of what happens in this book or like specific plot points. I just remember like vague things and some random scenes. So I'm excited to like reread this, especially now, because I think when I first read this, I just wasn't really feeling the beginning half of the book, and it was really hard to get into for me. It felt really dense. I also just wasn't in the mood for it at the time. But I think this is like the perfect time to be picking this book up. And also part of me is really excited to read this because I want to be ready for the sequel, which is coming out in January. I got dressed in my little like dark academia-ish outfit with my Taylor Swift cardigan on. I love the vibes. I am gonna curl up today and read most of this today before I head out for a little appointment and then for a haunted house later tonight. I feel like the vibes are just coming together because this book is definitely on the spookier side. It's got ghosts, it's got death, it's got secret societies. It is set at Yale, for those of you who don't know. So far, I'm not remembering too much, so I'm excited to like delve into this and see if I enjoy this more the second time as well, because personally I didn't love it, like the experience of reading it the first time, but I did overall love the story and like the characters I was really, you know, interested in, especially Darlington, not so much the other characters, but mostly Darlington. And I was intrigued to see where it was gonna go. But aside from that, I don't think it was like a favorite book of mine. I think I was more enamored with the idea of like Leigh Bardugo's adult book back then versus actually really loving the book itself. I'm also interested to just look at this in a different lens because there were things about this that bothered me the first time around reading it, but I just couldn't put it into words. And so I'm interested to see if I'll feel differently about it this time. With all that said, I'm gonna go cozy up and get into reading more of this book. So I'm about 50 pages into Ninth House, and the audiobook is great. They have a different narrator for Alex and for Darlington as well, who I forgot has perspective chapters in this book, so that's exciting. But I am starting to realize something about this book which I sort of forgot from the last time I read it. The first time I read it, I was only thinking about this sort of supernatural occult element of the book and sort of the feminist aspect of the book and how it examines rape culture and all of that. But I wasn't really thinking about some of the other aspects of the book. I really loved Darlington as a character, but I'm like reading the beginning of this book and I'm like, you're kind of a terrible person. Like, you're being complicit in a lot of these terrible things. Although you are trying to do something to mitigate how terrible they are, you're still letting them happen. You're still being complicit, which is like interesting. I never thought about it before, and now I'm like, oh wow, okay, like you're just gonna let this happen. Alex is also an interesting character because she's like calling it out, but then she's also like, you know, this is the best deal she's ever gotten, so she's just going along with it. Another thing about Alex that is like slightly weirding me out is her background. She grew up with a Jewish mother who is either dead or estranged, and she has a father who she doesn't know. And then there's mention of her growing up with her Ladino grandmother, and all of it was just interesting to me. I know she's Jewish, I know she's Latina of some kind, but it's like she's so far removed from any sort of background or culture. It feels like she is just been given some flavor for the sake of it. I don't know like the full extent of Leigh Bardugo's background, but it just feels a little strange. I do think the book is like calling out racial elements and like how the girl who dies at the beginning of the book is white and so she'll get a lot of attention and that kind of thing, but I don't think it's doing the best it can. And I think this is my issue with some of Lee Vertigo's books, is that they are trying to, you know, be inclusive and like whatever, but they don't fully examine the racial implications within the books. And that's one of the issues that I had with the Shadow and Bone show. It talked about this racism in this fantasy world, but struggled to actually tackle that in a meaningful and coherent way. It was just all over the place. And if you want to know more about that, I would go check out some discourse online, or I'll leave it down below. My point here is that I'm looking at this with a new lens, and just being older now and like having thought about these things more since reading this. I think one thing about dark academia is that it likes to talk so much about privilege when it comes to class and wealth, but it does not want to talk about privilege when it comes to race. And I think Babel did such a good job of tackling that element of how race plays such a big part into it, and how colonialism has played such a big part into academia, and how like some of these institutions are literally built on the back of slaves. And it's just so fascinating that books like this, and I'm assuming The Secret History as well, don't even brush that surface. I think there's a lot of valuable things that are talked about in this book though, and I don't want to diminish that, but I do think that like it doesn't completely tackle the whole dark academia argument or concept. If you're gonna do a dark academia, the racial aspect does play a huge part in the academic setting. Regardless of all of that, I'm still really enjoying this and like intrigued by everything that's going on, and I want to know more, and I feel like I'm just reading this a little bit more carefully than I did the first time I read it. I read it through an arc, and like it just was really slow to start for me, and I could barely get into it, but it's going better this time, especially with the audiobook, so I'm excited to see how I feel about this by the end, especially in comparison to Babel. I have a few things to get done today, so I probably won't get too much reading done for the rest of the day, but I'm going to continue with this tomorrow, and I'll update you then. Hello friends, it's Monday. I had a busy weekend. I went to this like haunted house thing on Saturday called Screamers, which was super fun. And then I also went to the Bridgerton experience yesterday on Sunday, which was just the best thing ever. But today is Monday. It is about 8:30 p.m. I have been reading Ninth House for the past few hours after work finished. So far this has been a really interesting experience because I'm remembering the story again as I'm reading, but like most of it I hadn't remembered, so it's just nice to like sort of re-experience it because it feels like I'm reading it for the first time, but I'm also like, oh yeah, this happened, and then like I go on with it. One thing I am finding is that I'm enjoying this a lot more the second time around, just because the first time I was really confused and I felt like the story was just really slow, but now knowing what happens at the end and like going back to it, it's a lot more enjoyable, I feel like, and I just know what's going on a little bit better, and I'm already familiar with the characters. One thing I'm noticing as I'm reading this is that it is very heavily leaning into the supernatural aspect of the book and like the ghosts and sort of the murder mystery going on as well. And it's just really interesting to see how the books really focus on their backstories and how sort of lonely they are. I think one thing about this book that feels different from the other dark academias that I've read is that it is very lonely. Like the characters are on their own for most of it, and like it's not like Alex has a lot of friends in this book also, which is something that I find is more of an aspect in some of the other dark academias. Like Babel has it, and I know Secret History has like a group of people, and I know If We Were Villains has a group of friends, quote unquote. And I think there's something about the aspect of like a shared sense of obsession and pretension and just a need to cover up a murder is a part of the dark academia that I didn't know that I would sort of miss or want, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. A final observation that I want to talk about before I go and read the rest of the book is that I am finding the sort of slight romance between Alex and Darlington a little less compelling on the second round, just because like I know the characters a little bit better now. I feel like the first time I read this I was so enamored with Darlington as a character. I feel like this time I'm like a little bit more aware of him as a person and sort of the privilege that he holds, but also like where he's coming from. He has this like whole backstory to him as well, so I don't think he's a terrible person or anything, but I do think he's very complicit in a lot of the things that he does. So in that way, he's a little less attractive to me now. But another thing is that I feel like whatever is going on between them is not as enchanting as I thought it was, I guess, in my head. I think I projected a lot of the like Kazan and Nej vibes from the Six of Crows series onto these guys because they have some of that element. So it's interesting to like look back on this relationship, but I'm interested to see where it's going to go in the next book also, because there are some developments by the end of this book, which will make it interesting for the next book. Hello friends, it's a new morning. It's Tuesday. I stayed up until 1 a.m. finishing Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I don't know what it was about this book, but even though I had read it before, I was so hooked at the end of it. And I just needed to know what was gonna happen, even though I knew what was gonna happen. I just like needed to experience it again, and so I stayed up until 1 a.m. trying to finish this, and I did, and it was fucking fantastic. And I'm so glad actually that I reread this because it was so much better the second time around. I do still stand by the idea that the first half of the book isn't as compelling as the second half of the book, but I did appreciate the first half a lot more. And I do think I appreciated Alex as a character a lot more this time around. I think in the beginning of the book, she is not the most compelling person to follow, but she really just becomes so much more compelling by the end of the book. And there's this really interesting motif of snakes, which I never really got the snake on the cover before, but I realized afterwards as I was reading that Alex is compared to a snake in many instances, and like she sort of has snake-like tendencies or appears like a snake at different moments, especially when characters are looking at her under the influence. And so it was really interesting to see that motif played out as well. I had also forgotten like some specifics of the ending, so that was really nice to like remember those and actually confirm them properly in my head. I will say the second half of this book is a lot more harrowing, I think, than the first half. There are some flashbacks to Alex's past in the beginning half of the book, but the second half is where you get most of them, and those parts are just really heartbreaking and sad and depressing, I will say. There's just some really horrible things that happen in her life, and so reading those weren't the greatest time, but like I understand why they were included and how she's showing the lifestyle of this girl and how she is so grateful for everything that she has now at Yale. And I don't know, it was just such an interesting experience reading this. I think I really appreciate what this book was trying to do, the way that it was tackling rape culture and sort of had some feminist elements to it, and was really digging deep into the classism of dark academia and sort of the privilege of these wealthy white boys at these Ivy League schools. But it doesn't completely delve into the racial aspect of it, but I think there was no way that Leigh Bardugo was going to be able to do that in a meaningful way, not being a person of color, so I can't really fault her for that, if that makes sense. I think she did a really good job with the tools that she had and the lived experiences that she had, but I think there is like a person of color author who could have done a very similar story but expanded it even further and included the racial element to it. One thing that I didn't really love is that there's this part in the middle-ish of the book where a certain character gets sexually assaulted or raped, but it was the like person of color friend character. And not that there aren't other people of color in this book, something about it rubbed me the wrong way. I think the fact that we didn't know her too well as a character before this had happened to her, and then this having led to other plot points and like being a catalyst for other things that happened in the book, just rubbed me the wrong way. I think, you know, she didn't deserve to just be used as this like plot point. But again, these are characters, but still I feel like there's just something to be said about the way that character was used. Regardless, again, I do think this is a really fantastic book. I'm so fucking excited for Hellbent, which is coming out in January, because after rereading this and like getting to the end, I'm like, oh my god, I really want to know what's gonna happen next. So up next, I am reading The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I read a bunch of this morning actually, so I'm about 100 pages in, and it's going great so far. Many of you may know that I've already read the self-published version of this before, so this is technically a reread, but I do know that there are some differences in this traditionally published version. It was edited before it was put out, so I'm curious to see what those changes are going to be, because so far I haven't seen any major ones. But yeah, so far loving it. We are meeting 6 different characters who have all these different magical abilities, and this is like an alternate version of our world where these magical abilities exist. And they're approached by this man named Atlas, who is gathering them together to compete to become new curators for the Library of Alexandria and become part of this like Alexandrian society, which works under the eye of mortals and, you know, upholds all of this knowledge. So there's definitely a commentary there about the sort of exclusivity of the knowledge and the way that it's hoarded and it's kept amongst these magic users. So I'm interested to see if she tackles that further in this version, but so far loving the characters. I loved them the first time I read it, so it's just really nice to be back with them. And I'm just excited for the later parts of the book where like it gets a little bit more intense, because those were my favorite parts. So far it's like a teeny bit slow just because I've like read it before. I think one thing about Ninth House was that I had read it so long ago. I think back in 2018, I want to say. So it's been quite a while, whereas this one I read last year, so it's a lot more fresh in my brain. So in that way, like, it's not as compelling to reread it. I'm also curious to see how I'm gonna feel about like If We Were Villains and Legendborn, because those two, it's been a while since I read those ones as well. So I'm really excited to get to those ones, but yeah, we'll see how this goes. Hello friends, it is a lot later. It's around 10:30. I just got back from the gym. I had a training session, and I also finished the Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake earlier today. I finished it around, I think, 7, and then I chilled out for a little bit before I went to the gym. And this was great. It wasn't as gripping the second time reading it, just because I also remembered a lot of what happened in the book, but the ending was still really, really striking, and I think it was done a little bit better this time, I feel like, at least. Most of the book, almost like 90% of it, I want to say, was exactly the same as the self-published version, but I do think some of the ending was polished a little bit better because it made more sense this time to me versus the self-published version. I feel like that version I had so many questions at the end, but this one like made a lot more sense, and like there's a very clear gateway into the next book, which is actually coming out next week, which I'm super excited for. So I'll definitely be picking it up once it comes out. But overall, I think this one, in comparison to Babel and sort of Ninth House, really tackled the idea of the privilege of knowledge and how it's sort of hoarded and who gets to decide, you know, how that knowledge is used. And it really talks about this idea of like knowledge as carnage and how it can be a very destructive force and chaotic force given to the wrong people and used by the wrong people. And it's like this discussion of like, well, then who decides, you know, what's the right use and that kind of thing. One thing I did notice reading this the second time was that I wish we could have gone like a little bit deeper with each character, but a function of the book, because it's split between the different perspectives, is that you don't get to go as deep with each character. So I feel like this book felt a lot like setup for what's gonna happen in the later books. Unlike Ninth House, this one did have the whole aspect of like a group of friends, quote unquote, coming together and having this shared obsession and getting involved in some sort of murder. It happens in Babel, it happens in If We Were Villains, it happens in The Secret History, and I think that is like a big function of some dark academias, but I feel like some other dark academias like Ninth House operate without it, but it still has like a murder or death element to it. But what I liked about this one is that it really delved into thinking about like the justice of it. Like, what is the thing that you want so much that you'd be willing to kill someone for it? I found it so fascinating, and just how the different characters thought about this ethical question. One thing I was thinking about while reading this was how much I love some of the characters, especially Parisia and Callum, and also partly Tristan, but especially Parisia and Callum, just because Parisia is like the best character I have ever seen grace a set of pages, because she is just so multifaceted, but also just like such a badass, and I love her to death and I want nothing but the best for her. And then Callum, on the other hand, is a character that I'm so fascinated by, because he is the definition of a sociopath, I would say, but he also has like an extra element to him. Like, he's not a complete sociopath, I would say, but there's like this extra element to him that makes him a little bit more human, and I don't know what it is about him, but I just love reading about him. And it's just such an interesting conundrum seeing how his ability is being an empath, but somehow he lacks empathy, which is just so interesting. And I just love seeing him as a character on the page. He just had such interesting interactions with the characters, and the way that he wanted to use them was so fascinating. And the way that he's just so bored by the world, like he's just trying to find some sort of entertainment. He could be like a, you know, serial killer or a dictator or a tyrant with the abilities that he has, but he chooses not to because he's just like sort of lazy about it and it's just boring to him. And so he chooses to just go on by doing interesting things that pique his interest, but yeah, he just could be so much more, but he chooses not to, and I find that conundrum fascinating. But yeah, overall, love this. Not my favorite going over it the second time, but it still is really good, and I think it has so much potential for the next book, so I'm excited to see where it goes. One thing I did like about this book, which is also present in Babel, is just like the way that these people of color are engaging with the world and how their experiences are slightly different. And it also lightly touches upon the idea of colonialism. I do think it could have gone a little bit deeper into that, especially when we're considering the whole idea of the Library of Alexandria and all of this information. Like, it doesn't really delve into how this information was accumulated. I think there's this like idea of like the privilege and the classism and whatever, but it doesn't delve all the way in the way that Babel does, which is one of the things I just appreciate so much about Babel. Next up, I'll be reading If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I do have the audiobook for this on Scribd, so we're just like making it through with audiobooks for this vlog. It's really working for me, so I'm just happy. I think I read this one the first time through the audiobook as well. I can't honestly remember, but yeah, I'm excited for this one because I just remember being in love with the tension between the characters and just how their dynamic worked. So I think this one's gonna be really fun. And I think it's gonna be a quick one also because I remember reading it for the first time really quickly as well. So I have no doubt that I can probably knock this out tomorrow. Hello friends, good morning. It is Wednesday, I think. I'm just about to start work. I was listening to the audiobook of If We Were Villains this morning while doing my makeup, and it's going good so far. I realized that I don't actually remember a lot of what happens in this book, and like I barely even remember some of the characters, which is surprising to me, but I had never really thought about it when recommending this book. I just remembered like the feeling of reading the book and like how much I enjoyed it and how much I loved like the character dynamics, but I don't actually remember specifically the characters themselves, which is interesting and just speaks to like the enjoyment of a book and like how it could be different for each person. But yeah, but I'm sort of starting to familiarize myself with them again. They all have their own like distinct features to them, or roles you could say, in their friend group, which is like interesting because this is all about Shakespeare, and like even the chapters in the book are called scenes. So overall it's just really interesting and I'm enjoying it so far. So far I think the strongest element of this book of If We Were Villains is that it's got the obsession element and sort of the like shared obsession amongst these characters, and there's already like little seeds of what's gonna happen later and like how murder may occur. And I'm trying to remember how this book ends, but I honestly don't remember, and I don't even remember like some of the major plot points. I just know like the feeling of it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and it's just interesting to me that I don't remember half of what happens, but I'm excited to find out, so we'll see how this goes. Hello friends, I got a bunch of reading done during my lunch break, so I thought I would give you a little update. I'm currently in my backyard freezing my ass off because why not give you a different angle? I am about halfway through If We Were Villains by ML Rio. It is going fantastic. It is so like dramatic, which I knew it was gonna be, and I knew that it was because I've read it before, but it's just so dramatic and I love the tension between the characters. And I've reached a part of the book where everything has just like gotten shot off the rails and the characters are doing some very crazy and interesting things, and I'm questioning all their decisions, but also it's like so dramatic and I'm here for the drama, so I love it. And it's also interesting just to see like the spiral of madness going on amongst these characters and how their dynamics are reflecting the Shakespeare plays that they're putting on and all of that. So it's just really fun, and it was making me think of like the Shakespeare classes that I had taken in university. This is going great and I'm excited to see how the rest of it goes because I honestly don't remember the second half of the book all that well. Like as I was going through the first half I was like, okay, I remember this, I remember that, da da da, but the second half is like a total blur to me, so I'm excited to see what's gonna happen and then move on to Legendborn afterwards. I think I can definitely finish this before the end of the night, and then I'm gonna start on Legendborn hopefully later tonight so that I can get a head start on that. Hello friends, it's a new day, it's Friday, it's around lunchtime. I have a quick little break before my next meeting, so I thought I would update you guys because one, Taylor Swift's album Midnights came out last night and I have many thoughts. I have given it a couple listens now, and I will say that it's not my favorite of her albums. For some reason it's giving me a lot of Reputation vibes, but without like the oomph and the rage I remember from Reputation, which is what I loved about Reputation. So I'm not really feeling like the tone of the album, but I did really like the 3 a.m. edition add-ons to the album, so like the deluxe version, I guess, with those extra tracks. All of those slapped to me. I love them all, so I'm definitely gonna be listening to those more in the coming weeks. Another thing I wanted to update you guys on is that I just realized, because my sister texted me literally this morning and she was like, did you know that there is an Arv Kwong event in Toronto tomorrow? And I was like, huh? And I knew she was coming to Ottawa, but for some reason my brain literally saw her post on Instagram and didn't register that she was coming to Toronto and didn't plan for going to it. And so my sister messaged me and I was like, oh my freaking god, this would be perfect for both the vlog and also just me wanting to meet her and like chat about Babel, and just like having read Babel I have so many thoughts and I'm just so excited to see her speak and also just have her sign my books. So my sister and I are planning to go to the event tomorrow. I'm going to get brunch with a couple friends before that, and then I'm going to the event, and then I'm going to a comedy show in the evening. I'm going to see Taylor Tomlinson. If any of you know her, she has a Netflix special, or 2 of them actually, which I really actually enjoyed because she has like that sort of sarcastic millennial humor, which I love. So yeah. Tomorrow's gonna be an eventful day. I will bring you along for all of it. I do think because of all of this stuff going on, I may not get around to finishing more of the books, so we'll see. I'm gonna try and read a bit of Legendborn later tonight when I get home after pumpkin carving, but I don't anticipate reading a lot, so I think I'm gonna end up finishing Legendborn on Sunday and then reading The Secret History on like Monday or Tuesday. So yeah, this is all getting pushed, but it's okay because we're going to see RF Kwang. Also, side note, I did a whole video talking about how I'm feeling these days, and I had that video go up today at lunch at 12, and it's been about, I think, an hour, and the comments on that video have just warmed my heart. You guys are so amazing, and I just like almost started crying because I was like, I didn't realize how nice it would be to have other people like validate how I was feeling and also like share their experiences and say how they're feeling and, you know, the parts of my experience that they connected with. And it was just so validating and just so nice to like see your kind words, and I appreciate you guys so much. So yeah, thank you, because yeah, I was feeling really shitty yesterday when I filmed that and for basically the entire day, and I felt a little bit better after I went to my movie, but I was still kind of like waking up this morning feeling like, oh, I don't want to do anything, but I wanted to push through. And then just seeing your comments just made me so much more excited and so much more happy that I'm doing this, that I get to connect with you guys in this level. And yeah, I'm glad that like it was something that you guys resonated with. Hello friends, so I'm going to talk quick because my battery is running out, but it is a new day. It is Saturday. No, Sunday. It is Sunday. Yesterday I went to the RF Kwang event for Babel, and honestly it was such a great time, but I'm kind of sad because my sister and I, we decided to go for like just before the event started because we didn't think it would be that crowded. But boy, were we wrong. It was so busy. There were so many people, and we actually didn't even get to be in the signing line either because they had like capped it out. But we did go and have a lot of fun just listening to Rebecca speak. She had some really wonderful insights about the book and her inspiration behind it. And she's just like such a well-articulate person that I was just so fascinated by everything that she said. She had a few things that I really loved that she talked about. One thing was how the author's intent should not matter over the text itself. So someone had asked her what Robin's Chinese name is in Babel because it's never actually revealed in the book. And she answered by saying that, you know, it doesn't really matter what it is or what she says it is if it's not in the book itself, because it's what's in the book that matters and, you know, what we should be interpreting. And whatever she says outside of it is, you know, extraneous. It doesn't matter. And she actually didn't answer like what the name was because it doesn't. And I think it was a really good throwback to like sort of J.K. Rowling and how, you know, she says all these things outside of what's in the text, and it's like, okay, but it's not in the text, so it's not actually true. You know what I mean? I just loved how she talked about that and just like how the intent of the author doesn't really matter if the text says something different. But yeah, overall she was just like so cool, and she is definitely like a very academic and sort of school-minded person. Like she has done a master's and a PhD, and even the way she talks, she just, you know, is a bit of a nerd, and I just love that about her. So yeah, it was just so cool. And I can see, you know, the elements of that bleeding into Babel as well. And she said she's not sorry for all the footnotes in the book. And I'm like, yes, I'm not sorry that you did that because they're fantastic. So yeah, I just loved the whole experience of listening to her. And we like sat out in the front just watching her sign some books, and she's just so cool. Aside from that, during the event, another cool thing that happened was that a few of you actually came up to me and said hi, which was super cool. I met 4 of you and you were all lovely, and I took pictures with you guys, and it was just such a wonderful experience to like meet people who watch my videos, and you guys were just lovely. So yeah, I appreciate those of you who came up to say hi to me. If you ever see me at like another event, please say hi again. And if anyone else is ever in town or in Toronto, if you see me at an event, definitely don't hesitate to come say hi because it's just the coolest experience. I feel like some of the people I met were overwhelmed, but I was also overwhelmed as someone who's never met people who watch my videos. So yeah, it was a cool experience and just overall like a fun time as well. But yeah, I got no reading done in the last couple of days, so I'm gonna be focusing today on finishing and actually reading Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and then hopefully I can get through most of it today or finish it today, and then I can move on to the Secret History later this week. So that is the plan for today. Hello friends, it has been many weeks since I updated this vlog. I'm coming to you like in December actually. This is December 4th today when I'm updating this vlog. So it's been, I think, over a month since I started this vlog, and I really wanted this video to go up earlier in the fall, but my mental state just really didn't allow for that. I was going through a bit of a anxious and depressive episode. Not that I'm over it, but I do feel like I've been feeling a bit better over the past week or so. I've been a little bit less busy because NaNoWriMo is finally over, and although I didn't win in NaNoWriMo, I didn't hit the 50,000 words, I did get 38,000 words written, so like I feel really good about the fact that I made some progress. And so I'm no longer as busy as I was in November, and I am getting back into reading a little bit more, which is really nice. So I thought I would finish off this vlog and finally get this video out. Today I'm going to tell you my thoughts on my reread of Legendborn, and then I'll also be reading more of the Secret History and finishing off this vlog with that book. And I'm actually really excited because I did start it a few days ago and I have been actually really enjoying it, and that really surprised me because initially I just couldn't get into like the first chapter or so of that book, but once I got a few chapters in, it really started to suck me in, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I'll get to my thoughts on the Secret History in depth in a second, and like my initial thoughts, but first let me tell you about Legendborn. So this was my second reread of the book, and I'm sorry that I didn't get to like vlog this one as much because it really is a great book, but I was listening to this one mostly on the audiobook this time around. I think the first time I listened to the audiobook for the second half of the book, and then I was reading it physically for the first half, and I do remember having the same-ish situation where it was kind of slow in the middle of the book because a lot of things sort of happen and also are repetitive, I think, and you're just really going through the journey with Bree. But there's so many fantastic reveals at the end of the book, and all of that just got me really excited. So I think although I didn't enjoy this as much the second time around just because like the novelty of it has worn off, I do think like there were so many parts of the book where I'm like, yes, I love that we're discussing this. I love the themes that are coming up here, and I love that this is like very much a dark academia in the sense that it's really examining the history behind this academic institution and also this like lineage of power amongst the Legendborn, and it's really looking into colonialism and slavery and so many other big themes, and I just love that it tackles that, and I feel like I haven't seen a book do that as well as this book other than Babel, which I read at the beginning of this vlog. So overall I was just really satisfied with like the social commentary that goes on in this book, and also I really appreciated Bree's character. I think the first time around I was slightly frustrated with her, but this time around I kind of came to understand her a little bit more and like see her grief in all of her actions. So although this was a bit of a slog to get through and also contributed partly to like me not being able to read, like I was kind of in a reading slump because this felt a little slow to me, I still feel like it was a great book, and I still really loved all the reveals at the end, and it still got me really excited for the next book. And also let me just say I loved all the parts with Cell. I think it was just really interesting reading this the second time because knowing all the reveals from the end kind of changes your perspective on like some of the stuff earlier in the book and also how some of the relationships play out. I don't have too much else to say about this one other than the fact that like I think it does the dark academia aspects really well. You know, it's this like society of people that are all interconnected, and this newcomer comes in and there's the death plot and like, you know, figuring out the mystery of that. I think the one thing that this one lacks that some of the other dark academias had was like a shared murder that everyone commits, which like neither does Ninth House, but I know in like Babel and then in Secret History and in If We Were Villains, they've got that like shared murder aspect to it, which I think just adds a different kind of dynamic to the story. This one was definitely more similar to Ninth House in the sense that it is a dark academia but with like lots of magic and like more focus on the supernatural things going on and the deep dive into the corruptness and like bias within this institution, I guess. But yeah, those are all my thoughts on Legendborn. I don't have too much else to say. I will like sort of summarize all these books together at the end and how I feel about them in relation to each other. And now I guess I'll update you on how I'm feeling about Secret History. So I am about 72 pages into this, which is like honestly only 2 chapters, or like I'm only on the 2nd or 3rd chapter because the chapters are ridiculously long in this book, which I didn't know. It's also got like really tiny font and it's like almost 500 pages. So this book is long, but so far I'm really enjoying it. And I honestly didn't expect that because the beginning of the book was kind of hard to get into. Like, it's just very dense. And then once you get into it though, and once you start to meet the characters, I think that's when it gets interesting. And it's already just so fascinating to me, the privileged lives that these characters live, and also the main character and his sort of desire to be amongst these, you know, elites. And I think one thing I didn't expect about this book was the level of satire and sort of commentary that it makes, because it's not really trying to idealize this privileged set of people and their eliteness. It's really sort of giving this satirical look at them, and I think that is one of the impressive things that Donna Tartt is doing. And I feel like whenever I hear people talk about this, they are just being like, oh, it's pretentious or whatever, and I'm like, yes, but it's like making a commentary on that pretentiousness, if that makes sense. And I feel like If We Were Villains does the same thing, but I feel like this one does it in a more pointed way, and it's like more obvious, I feel like, but it's also more well done, I would say. So yeah, I'm just really enjoying this so far. Like, I can see why it's a modern classic and why so many people love it. I am really curious to see what I'm gonna think of it by the end, because I still have like 400 pages to go. But so far already, I've been like tabbing places in the book and like underlining things because there were some lines that I really loved. Hello friends, it is a few weeks later and I have finally finished The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I did not intend for this update to be so late or for myself to take this long to read this book, but honestly, although the very initial parts I wasn't really vibing with, and then once I got further in, I was like, oh yes, I'm loving this, we again took a turn towards like, okay, what's the point of this? And then like a lot of things happen. And then again, I was like, what's the point of this? And then a lot of things happen again. So this book in a way just kept ebbing and flowing. And I honestly just didn't know what to think the entire time. There were parts of this book where I was like, I love this. This is amazing. And then there were other parts where I was like, what the fuck is going on? And like, can this just get to the point? Without spoiling anything for any of you who haven't read this, I feel like I can totally see why people love this book so much. I can definitely see myself making it my entire personality if the parts that I didn't totally love didn't exist. This book definitely delves into that dark academia feeling, but it did take a turn that I didn't expect, in the sense that it delves more into the murder plot of the book rather than the academia part of the book, which I feel like some of the other books that we talked about in this video do more of. I feel like Babel does more of the academic part of things and sort of the whole system, whereas this book gets really focused on the murder. There's another aspect of like the later end parts of the book sort of really focusing on the social drama between the characters, which I did enjoy, but I did feel like it was starting to get a little soapy and dramatic. This book has been out for like decades now, and it's a pretty well-known part of the book, but there is an aspect of a shared murder, and I feel like that whole reasoning for that shared murder felt a little less authentic than I was expecting it to be. If We Were Villains does the exact same thing, but I think the way they justify the murder makes more sense to me than it did in this one. And in this one though, it is interesting to see how deeply Donna Tartt delves into the satire and critique of these characters who are so privileged and have so much money and can just basically do whatever they want. And although the main character and narrator is someone who is slightly outside of that, he's on the poorer side, he doesn't have all of these privileges to him, he still has some of them by association, and so it's just interesting to see how he himself gets corrupted as well. One of my favorite aspects of this book was how we got to learn more about each of the characters as the story went along. I feel like in the first 200 pages of the book, I honestly didn't know who they were, couldn't tell them apart, and was just so confused by all of them. But once we get into the murder plot, we start to get a lot more of those characters and our main cast and how they interact with each other, and we start to see their very distinct personalities come out, and especially towards the end. I feel like Henry was the most vivid character to me, and then Francis, and then the twins started to gain more vividness to me towards the end of the book with all the stuff that goes on. One thing I didn't expect was the way that Julian's character didn't play as big of a part in the overall story as I was expecting. When we initially meet him, I felt like he was gonna have a huge influential force on these characters, which to a certain extent he does, but it's much more subtle than I expected it to be. And overall, this was just so interesting and so well done in so many ways, but I do feel like the major thing that put me off of this book was the really dragging story and the way that it took forever to get to some of the juicier bits of the book, and how the author would like delve into these very deep descriptions of like everybody and their mom related to the story. And I also felt like the story just kept like going towards the end in a way I was like, can we just wrap this up? Another thing I didn't really love was the strange Orientalism of this book, and how there's like this fictional Iranian Middle Eastern country called the Izrami, and how Julian used to teach a princess from there. Like, that whole thing was just ridiculous, and I was like, where does this add to the story in any way? And it just felt very much like they were exoticizing the Middle East. And given when this was written, I am not surprised that that kind of stuff was in this book, but you know, I didn't love it. And being a modern reader of this book, it definitely put me off in some ways, so I definitely couldn't consider this like a favorite because of those elements. But one thing I did really like is the total queer undertones to basically everything going on in this book, whether it's the actual gay characters in the book or just the queer vibes going on between characters that you could envision potentially being queer in some way. I think although this secret history is like credited with sort of being the beginning of dark academia books, I do think there's an element that is missing in this book that Babel tackles so much better. I think Babel tackles the entire system of academia and really delves into that, whereas this book kind of just turns into Gossip Girl at the end with all of the betrayals and the romantic relationships and just the general anxiety. I feel like Babel is definitely more of a literary masterpiece to me than this book was in any way. Although the way this is written is really incredible and beautiful and really just gets you so fascinated with these characters, I do think that in the end, the overall story of this is more forgettable to me than Babel was. Okay, so I grabbed all 6 of the books that I read in this video, and I want to rank them in terms of what I think is the best in quality and also what I think really tackles this idea of dark academia. In first place is obviously Babel. As I've said before, this book is fantastic, and it was really funny seeing the discourse online on Instagram and Twitter recently about these white reviewers reading this book and getting upset that it was being racist to them when reverse racism is not a thing, people. Don't try even. And it was funny because they had missed the entire point of this book and the point of Letty's character, and how so often white people will put themselves as the victim, even though people of color are explaining so carefully and so nicely what is wrong with the system. And it's just so interesting to see that play out in real life, and how right R.F. Kuang is in this book, and how well she portrayed this type of person in Letty's character. I think this book not only does this whole aesthetic of dark academia and not only has this shared murder plot and this sense of obsession, but it also ties it back to everything that informs this sort of thought process and this state of obsession. It delves into the systems that make this possible and create this environment, and also shows an array of characters that really reflect our real world. It is profound, it is moving, it is heartbreaking, and it is a book that I will never ever stop thinking about. In second place, I think I have to go with Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, because there's just something about this book that enraptured me even on the second time I read it. Although this book doesn't have the whole shared murder aspect, I do think it has that level of obsession, and it does deal with death as Alex is trying to figure out who the murderer is. And I think what puts this book at second place for me is that it also critiques the system like Babel. Although this one isn't as expansive as Babel is, it does get into the privilege of these students at this prestigious institution, and it also talks about the rape culture that happens at these institutions. In third place, I think I'm gonna double up with The Secret History and If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I think both of these books are very, very similar, and they both are mainly an all-white cast, and they have this shared murder and this sense of obsession with this particular strand of study. So in If We Were Villains, it's Shakespeare, and in The Secret History, it's Greek and the classics. And it's so interesting to see how the characters literally put themselves into their studies and start to manifest that in their real lives. And I think both of these share an aspect of not really critiquing the systems that they come from, but satirizing them and poking fun at them. And they both also delve into this sort of dramatic social drama between the characters and their romantic relationships and their friendships. And they both also have some really great queer undertones. And so for that reason, I think they're very similar and do a lot of the same things. I do feel like both of these do embody more of a dark academia aspect than the other two I'm going to talk about in a second. And for that reason, I think they are solidly in the middle of this list. And then in fourth place, I'm going to put The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I think this one does delve into that dark academia aspect and sort of the power of knowledge and how knowledge is hoarded. I don't think this book does it quite as well as some of the other books on this list, and it doesn't poke fun enough that it's a satire either, but it does have the aspect of the shared murder and the shared sense of obsession and the willingness to potentially kill someone for your own needs and ends. This one is a really fun one with interesting characters, and for that reason I think it's a really fun read, but I don't necessarily think it's the best dark academia. And then finally we have Legendborn, and I'm not saying that this one is a bad book. This is actually more of a favorite for me than some of the other books on this list, but I do think in terms of dark academia, this one felt the least like a dark academia to me, just because it didn't have a lot of the aspects that the other books do. It didn't really have a murder plot line in any way, but it does critique an entire institution and system, which I did really appreciate. And it also has so many historical elements that work into the present day narrative, which I really appreciated. But I do think overall this one feels a lot more like a really incredible fantasy to me rather than a dark academia. With all that said, those are all the books on this list for this video and all of my thoughts on them and how I feel about them in relation to each other when thinking about dark academia as an aesthetic and as a subgenre. I think this was a really fun exercise and delving into what I personally feel about dark academia, and I'm finding that I really do like this vibe and this aesthetic, and I definitely would read a lot more books in dark academia. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I apologize for how long this video is and how long it took me to get it up, but I appreciate you watching even if it's a little bit late. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments which of these books you've read and what you think of them and your personal thoughts on them, whether you disagree or agree with me. I feel like there's so much to discuss about each of these books, and I would love to hear any of your thoughts on specific like plot twists or plot elements of each of these books and how you would personally rank all 6 of the books on this list. If you want to get regular updates on my reading and what I'm up to, then go check out my Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and TikTok in the description down below, and I will see you in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!